All right, welcome everyone to today's workshop on why does the world need slow fashion revolutionaries. We have with us today Shruti Singh, and it's my honor to introduce her to you all today. Shruti Singh is a dedicated advocate for sustainability and transparency in the fashion industry. As the country head of Fashion Revolution India, she's a leading expert working at the intersection of education, fashion, craft, and public policy. She is a founder of Designing Future Earth, an initiative to promote climate literacy and simplify sustainability careers. She has a strong background in policy consulting for the Ministry of Human Resource Development, Ministry of Textiles, and Social Sector Advisory at PwC. She was a researcher for the Fashion Transparency Index 2021, authored a policy report on reimagining the craft economy post COVID 19, and co authored Gender Equity and its impact on sustainability in cotton farming in India. She graduated from NIFT Delhi and holds a master's in fashion entrepreneurship from the London College of Fashion and a second master's in public administration from the Kuan School of Public Policy, National University of Singapore. Shruti Singh recently also authored the Stakeholder Insight Report in partnership with British Council of India, Craft in the Age of Climate Crisis. Her experience and expertise will add a huge amount of value to our cause as change makers. And with that, I welcome Shruti and hand over the mic to her. Thank you, Shruti. Thank you for coming here today.
Thanks, Nisha. Thank you so much. And welcome, everyone. I know it's a Sunday, so thank you for spending that Sunday with us. I know the session was actually called How to Be a Fashion Revolutionary, Slow Fashion Revolutionary. But I thought before the how, let's figure out the why. Why does the world need a slow fashion revolution, which would be powered by slow fashion revolutionaries? And I thank our slow fashion movement for bringing this workshop together. I would love to know on the chat where you're from, what your name is, what you do. And we'll have a session, we'll have a Q&A session post this a little presentation which I've prepared. So let's keep it interactive. I'm here to answer your questions. And we're all in this together. So fashion supply chains, as most of you may know, are really long. They're also fragmented. They go across various countries. From where the raw material comes from, and the different processes it goes through, from making into a yarn, fiber, fabric, embellishments, cutting it out, shipping it to your retail stores where it finally gets sold to the consumers. And the life does not actually end there. After the consumers have used that clothes, what happens to them? Where do they end up? We are dealing with a lot of manifestations of crisis because of the way the supply chain is set up, and because of fast fashion, where new clothes are being produced at a very accelerating rate. So what happens when clothes are produced? You are extracting raw materials from the earth, whether, if it's a viscose, then it's coming from trees. If it's polyester, and 60% of our fabrics are now made out of polyester. It comes from fossil fuel industry. And cotton comes from agricultural farms. So there are a lot of different sectors also associated with fashion supply chains, and not to forget to mention the very important aspect of makers. Fashion employs a lot of people across the world into the supply chains, and a lot of them also work in the informal economy. So they work from their homes. They are contract workers. Sometimes they do not have protection, legal protections that a normal employee in corporations have. So those are all the things that we have to take care of. And because the supply chains are really, really long, there is a lot of transportation and transportation related emissions, which fashion supply chains are responsible for. So I think it's the second largest polluting industry after aviation and transportation. And it is also responsible for 10% of all global emissions. As we all know, we are crossing planetary boundaries. Scientists have raised an alarm that something needs to be done about the carbon emissions. And this was the hottest year. So whichever part of the world you are in, you would have experienced climate change in one way or the other. So it is a crisis that needs to be solved today. So these are some of the statistics just for your knowledge that 100 billion garments are produced each year. We have a population of 8 billion. And 100 billion garments which are produced each year is also an estimate because brands do not disclose the amount of garments that are being produced. What we see in their audit reports, what we see in their company decks is the number of garments that they have sold, but not the amount that they have produced. So we have no idea of the magnitude of extraction and raw materials that have gone into the production of those garments. A lot of garments, even before they are sold, and because they are not sold, are either incinerated, especially luxury companies are notorious for doing that. Because they do not want to devalue their brand by putting it on discount or giving it through the informal thrift channels and secondhand markets. And if you see news, and I'm sure you followed on social media, in Atacama Desert in Chile, from Google, if you zoom in, you can see a huge mountain of clothes, which can be viewed from satellites. And a lot of those garments are actually packed with tags, so they have never been sold. Lot of collections, we know we started from 2 seasons, 4 seasons. That's how our fashion shows were also set up. 252 micro collections per year. And things were always not like this, right? Because fast fashion is a fairly recent phenomena. It's not very, very old. If you look at, I think it's only 30, 40 years old. And it was popularized by Zara when it came up with collections that were changed every 15 days. And now we have a lot of companies which are producing 20,000 styles per day. It's constantly to keep you hooked. Outfit of the day has become the norm. Everyone wants something new, and new means buying new instead of looking at other avenues like secondhand and thrift stores. And if you look at 20 years ago to now, 400% more clothes are produced today. And 7 times in average, a garment is worn before being thrown away. So if you look at your mother, your grandmother, your ancestors, they used to use clothes, then you would pass on the clothes to younger siblings. And then, if the cloth, they would find some repurposing of the cloth if it's no longer in a condition to be worn or it gets torn. Mending was a thing. But now we are wearing our clothes far lesser. 90% of our wardrobes, in fact, are not used today. So if you look at your own wardrobes, you would be using only about 10% of those, the clothes today. And this is a stat from EU. 11 kg textile waste is generated per person per year. And at least 50% of our clothes and wardrobe are not being worn. This is a stat perhaps from Europe, but we have later stats which say 90% of clothes are not being worn. And if you look at all the underutilized and unutilized clothes sitting in our wardrobes, if we could just find a way to bring them into the supply chains again, we would not need to produce any new clothes for about 7 years. So if we just halted production, but that's not the answer. That's not what I'm saying. It is just to give you a magnitude of what we are sitting with in terms of clothes and the production that we have. But we can't halt production because there are a lot of people who are responsible for their jobs, their livelihoods on the supply chain. And talking about the makers, there are also people who are not paid really well. Most of the workers are paid minimum wages. A lot of times you see a violation in minimum wage as well. And if you know how minimum wage is calculated in every country, minimum wage is the money you need to fulfill the calorific requirement in a day. So what you need to eat, are you able to purchase that? But that's not enough to have a safe, dignified work life, to save for a rainy day, to have money for hospitalizations or any health-related crisis, to have money to send your kids to school, and in some way do better in life, to be able to progress and save some money. So that is another aspect that is fueled by fast fashion, because while the raw material costs have gone up, overall the prices of clothes have become cheaper. And if you ask who's paying that cost of fashion and why is it available for such a less amount, and the answer most of the times is that the workers who are in the supply chain are paying the cost of that garment being at such cheap rate. And the second thing is, earlier clothes were produced for durability, and now if you see, the quality of the clothes is also deteriorating, because it's hard to produce that kind of clothing in such less amount of money. So that is something to do with fast fashion, the workers, and fashion relates to not just the climate aspect or the social aspect, but also cultural, because a lot of your clothes pass through the hands of craftsmen. If they are embroidering something, if there is an embellishment that is coming on, so all of those are also part of the supply chain. Maybe the cloth that is being used is handloom, so it is woven by someone sitting on a machine and manually weaving a fabric. So fashion is responsible for waste, like I mentioned, and there is a stat which all of you would be familiar with, but that kind of always makes me think that every single second a truckload of clothes is being thrown into landfill every single second. So that is a lot of amount of waste, and a lot of that waste can be utilized. And the problem with landfills is also not the space they take, but because a lot of these clothes take a huge amount of time to decompose. Not all of them are biodegradable, and they release toxic fumes, which can be detrimental to the health of people living near landfills. This is an image of, unfortunately, rivers in China. And I actually Googled these because I read, or I was speaking to someone told me that, if you want to know the color that will be trending next season, just look at the river, the color of the river flowing through China, where the textile production factories are. And that's so unfortunate, because if you see these colors, they are chemicals. They are chemicals that are not treated, a lot of times released into water and water streams. And people use a lot of these water streams for drinking, for washing their clothes, for other aspects, and that causes diseases, and that causes problems to people who are living around the textile producing area. If I talk about India, there is an area in Tamil Nadu where over time people realized that infertility rates increased, and that was due to and attributed back to the chemicals that were being disposed into the water streams. And that is something that you cannot go back on those health parameters, but if I remember correctly, every fifth person was dealing with infertility. And that's a really, really big number and a health crisis in itself. So water streams. Second thing about water I don't want to mention is we have heard a lot about microplastics being released into water and into oceans that impact the marine life and the biodiversity. Although microplastics that are released, we can't even see them, but because they are polyester, they are synthetic, they impact the life. And for the first time, microplastics are seen in clouds. So they're everywhere. In the last few years, we heard that microplastics are in our bloodstreams. Microplastics are in a newborn, not even a newborn, a fetus inside a mother's womb. And now you have stardust made up of microplastics. And that's something to be spoken about, because we cannot, it is detrimental not just to health, but environment and the existence of the planet itself. I don't mean to make it sound like the planet is ending, but in a lot of ways, we are heading there. And to challenge the status quo, because what happens is when we're born into this, we've seen this for a very, very long time, and we kind of accept that fast fashion is the way for life. There is nothing else. We've not seen anything else. And every time we have to do a systems change, we need to overthrow the system, or we need to challenge the system. And every time we have to challenge the system, we need revolutionaries. I've spoken about microplastics. There is a small video. I don't know if you have seen that, but I would like to play it. If just let me know if you're able to hear it. This was a social experiment which was done by Fashion Revolution Germany. They put a little vending machine in a very crowded market space. And as you could see, they showed people that this is how your clothes are made. And once people knew and had that knowledge that this is how clothes are made, how long do the people working in the supply chains, how many hours they spend, what are the kind of health benefits they don't have, and what they are paid per clothing, people chose to support and donate instead of buying that €2 clothing. And why this is important to show in this particular workshop is that when people know, they choose better. And that's why movements like Fashion Revolution, Slow Fashion Movement, other sister movements like Remake, and a lot of other people who are working in this industry play a big role in bridging that gap. Because when we see clothes, we either see glossy runways where everything is so beautifully curated, or we see retail stores which are well lit with beautiful clothes that we do not know the journey of the clothes, or we don't know the story behind the clothes. Which is also another thing that we advocate for is transparency. If we know with transparency, and I think I would cover that. A vast majority of garment workers are not paid enough to fulfill their basic needs, while major fashion brands continue to profit from their hard work. In fact, it's not as if fashion industry is not profitable. We are profitable. The problem that we have is a fair distribution of um, the profits. So the profits are not fairly distributed across the fashion supply chains. And the richest man today is actually the owner of a fashion brand. So it's a way just to prove, not to call him out, well done, but to call out the fact that it's possible. If the owner or the CEO is making a lot of money, if they share a fraction of that cost across the supply chain, people will benefit and things will be better. Better chemicals will be chosen, better dyes will be chosen, better salaries will be given. 90% of the brands do not publish the number of workers in their supply chain who are paid a living wage. They do not disclose if they even give a fraction of how much of the price of the clothing is what goes to the makers or the workers. And this, again, disclosures are important. What companies share with us is important. And this lack of transparency indicates a lack of commitment to living wages, maintaining a system of poverty pay, and it crystallizes the fact that voluntary measures alone are not enough, and they are failing to drive progress. And transparency in fashion matters because a lot of things are opaque. We don't know what is happening on the factory floors. We don't know how much the clothes travel before they reach you. So transparency leads to scrutiny, and scrutiny leads to accountability. Because when you know if something is wrong, even for brands, because a lot of times things are outsourced and they don't know what is happening on the outsourced factories. So if they care about transparency, they know what's happening, and if they know if something is wrong, then they are able to fix it. And as consumers, if we have that knowledge, we can also raise awareness and say, hey guys, we love your brand. We love buying from you, but there's this little problem. Can you please fix it? And that fixing leads to change. So these are some of the things that need to change. One is model. The model of fast fashion needs to slow down, and that's why we are talking about slow fashion and slow fashion revolution and slow fashion revolutionaries. Is because the model needs to change. We need to rethink the rate at which we are producing and the rate at which we are consuming needs to be altered. Second biggest thing is materials. We've spoken about materials and where they come from. They have a huge environmental impact. Everything is made out of materials. So, and materials are the tangible things, how you can measure and see what goes into making of the clothes. And that's also a way when we talk about circular economy, that circular economy change will actually happen from innovation in materials and how we use those materials and how we build the clothes. Are we designing for disassembly? Is it a blend, because blends are harder to recycle, or are we making single material clothing? So all those factors play a big role in deciding what kind of industry we have, and what kind of impact that industry would have on the social governance and environmental factors. And also ultimately the mindset, and mindset not just of producers or brands, but clothes. We all wear clothes. We all have the power to influence clothes, because when we choose and decide and say, we'll just wear organic cotton, or we'll just wear clothes, we'll just buy from brands who have a resale program, then we are shifting, or we are signaling to the industry that these are the values that we care about. And this is where we need to see the industry moving forward. So that's the mindset that we need to look at. Even how we care for our clothes, small things. So are we, even dry clean has a huge cost. So a lot of times I see sustainable clothes have a tag saying dry clean only. And then I wonder, like, it's sustainable, but like with dry clean, we'll be using a lot of petroleum and fossil fuels. So how can we solve for that? And can a simple hand wash help? How do we dry our clothes? Are we using a dryer? Are we using energy? Or are we drying them in air? So very, very small things as a mindset can make a lot of change. And can I repeat my clothes? Is a simple ways we can stir up a revolution. And anyone can be a slow fashion revolutionary. And I mean anyone, because I do come from a fashion background, but I worked most of my life in gender justice and in policy. And I came back to working in an organization that works in fashion industry. We have people in our team who are designers, who are activists, environmentalists. There's someone who's from climate tech. We have students who are still in school, some who are studying in universities, who are building that change within their ecosystems. So really, anyone can be a slow fashion revolutionary, even if you're not part of these movements, even if you're not doing events like this. But even like I spoke about the mindset, if you have that mindset, if within by yourself, maybe with your family, in your spaces, if you're having a conversation and you are able to change even few things that people adopt as practices, that is revolution in itself. Fashion Revolution, like other movements, has a manifesto we work on. So these are some of the things we realized are very important for a slow fashion revolution, to provide dignified work, to have fair and equal pay, a space where people can voice and speak without fear. Respecting culture and heritage is very, very important. Fashion that stands for solidarity, inclusiveness, and democracy. Fashion conserves and restores the environment. Fashion that doesn't destroy or discard, but mindfully redesigns in a circular way. Transparency and accountability is important, and how we measure success uh, to go beyond sales and profit. And on this, I think I do want to mention a brilliant piece of writing and book called Earth Logic, because every time we are using a lot of business logic and economic logic to drive the decision making in our brands and ecosystems. But if we look at Earth Logic and we consider ourselves, and that's what I love about craft. I know Inisha mentioned that we I just authored a report on craft in the age of climate crisis. But when I was, and I'm not from a craft background, but when I met people who are in craft ecosystem, what I realized, one thing which was common was there was not us humans and nature as separate. They said we are part of nature. We are part of that ecosystem. We are part of that nature. We interact with nature. Nature impacts us in a beautiful way. We have a way of impacting nature. So we're all connected. So not to consider one against the other. We're not separate. And if we start thinking of ourselves as a symbiotic system, then that's how we would behave, and we would know that impacting the environment impacts us and vice versa. And lastly, fashion that celebrates life. How we do it is through policy and advocacy, education and research, and through collaborations. Collaborations are the biggest pillar and the most important, because this change cannot be made alone. So we need everyone to contribute in whichever way they can. We also observe Fashion Revolution Week, which is, and it's a revolution week because, we love Fashion Week. So we say, how can we have a Fashion Revolution Week? And we try to showcase good innovation, solutions to all the problems, because I know I spent a lot of time covering why we need a revolution and what the problems are in the industry. But also, it's important to highlight the solutions, because we need a pathway. We don't want it to become like an eco-anxiety thing where we feel like, oh my God, everything is so bad, we don't know what to do. And it's not about boycotting, but it's about nudging systems which can change. So these are some of the things that we do. We work with college students. This is a photograph from a swap. That event is called Swap Not Shop, which was done in Kolkata, where students organized everything. They had a mending station, they had a restyling session, they had a swapping, they did clothes swap, they did conversations around clothes, and they also wrote love letters to clothes that they no longer love, or they wanted to pass it on to someone else, or they actually did a ramp walk, wearing clothes which they loved of their mother and their grandmother and grandfather, and they kind of restyled it beautifully. So that's one of the things they did. This is also another glimpse of a panel discussion there. So how can you become a slow fashion revolutionary? And like I said, anyone can be a slow fashion revolutionary. So it starts with a conversation. And why conversations matter, you can see one of the campaigns that I've highlighted is Who Made My Clothes? Conversations are important because when you converse, you share ideas, you share problems, you share solutions. So anything, whether even on social media, when we are sharing something, it's a conversation. It's something that people observe, they understand, and they imbibe, and they figure out how to work with it. So be curious. And curiosity is really important because not everyone knows everything yet. A lot of times, even the innovations that are coming in, we don't know the long-term impact of those as yet. So curiosity is important. Look at all your labels always, like what does your label say and what does it not say? A lot of times information is not there on the label. So are you curious? Should there be more information disclosed by brands on the labels? So be curious and find out. I think finding out is most important, and curiosity leads to the action of finding out. So if you're more curious about resale in brands, talk to brands, find out more about it. If you're more curious about how can cotton be produced more responsibly, talk to the people in the cotton supply chain, figure out what can you do and where can you contribute. If you are more curious about craft systems being improved, then find out more about those craft systems. But it starts with that curiosity, and it starts with finding out the gaps, because when we try and find out the gaps, we know exactly where the root cause of the problem is, and where we can, if we make an effort to change, address that root cause, then change will happen. And do something. And do something, it could be anything. Big revolution. And I know this is something that Ursula de Castro, who is the co-founder of Fashion Revolution, she says the next big thing is not a big thing, but a lot of smaller things, and I love that, because sometimes when you see such a mammoth problem, you start thinking about, oh my God, I need to do something really big to create that change. But no, sometimes it's the smallest things that matter. And it doesn't mean that we stop buying clothes. It doesn't mean that we throw out everything that is polyester in our clothing. For example, what I'm wearing today is not made out of a sustainable material, but it's something that I've worn for a very, very, very long time. You would, if you see me on a lot of, if you just see my social media, if you see me on a lot of workshops, I would be wearing this. If you meet me somewhere, I would be wearing this. So it's also about celebrating and wearing your clothes for a longer period of time, because even that action makes a difference. It doesn't mean that you don't buy clothes. I do buy clothes, but now the way I buy clothes is different. So I make sure that I have a little checklist in my mind. Like, is it something I can wear for multiple events? Can it be styled differently? Is the color something that will not go out of fashion? Will I still be in love with it? So even if the color is out of fashion, would I still love wearing it? Is it a silhouette that suits my body type? So I have these bunch of questions I ask myself before I buy clothes, and everyone can have a different system. So there is no one, just like you don't have one size fits all. Similarly, you don't have a one method that fits every slow fashion revolutionary. You can have your own systems, you can have your own pathway and a playbook for change. So with that, I invite you to join the slow fashion revolution, and we're open for questions, any questions you may have. That's all from what I had prepared. Over to you, Nisha and Pooja. I know you guys are here, but anyone who has any question or wants to discuss, or even if it's something that you have, something you read this week you want to talk about, let's talk about it.